Hey guys, it's Kingdom Orange 2 here, and welcome back to my channel. I'm re-uploading this video because I wanted to give you guys way more Rapunzels to compare with one another. Now, similar to my newer videos, I will first start by recapping the Fairytale, comparing the various versions to it, and then end the video with my rankings. Also, feel free to tell me down below if there's any Rapunzels you feel that I have missed, which hopefully are very, very few. Now, before Mother Gothel cuts our hair, let's get right to it. The Fairytale. The 1812 Fairytale opens with a peasant husband and wife who live next to a sorceress that has a massive flower and herb garden. The pregnant wife craves for the Rapunzel, which is, if you didn't know, a sort of plant that I guess can be made into salads. His wife's cravings are so intense that she refuses to eat anything else. So for 2 nights, the husband sneaks into the garden and steals some of the Rapunzel. However, on the 3rd night, he is caught by the sorceress, who allows the man to take more Rapunzel to his wife, but under the condition that when the baby is born, he hands them over to her. And while initially reluctant to do so, the peasant husband agrees because he doesn't want his wife to wither away and die. The wife gives birth to a daughter, who Mother Gothel names Rapunzel. Rapunzel has long, beautiful golden hair, and when she turns 12, Gothel locks her in a tower in the middle of the woods. Since the tower has no stairs or doors, the only way Gothel can enter is by climbing up Rapunzel's hair, which she braids and fastens to a hook on the window. A few years later, a prince is riding through the woods when he hears Rapunzel singing. Enchanted by her beautiful voice, he finds Rapunzel in the tower but is unable to enter it. One day, he learns how to gain access by overhearing Gothel call out her famous words, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I may climb thy golden stair." After a while, Rapunzel and the prince fall in love and secretly wed. They plan a way to escape, where every night the prince will bring Rapunzel a strand of silk until she has acquired enough to make a ladder for her to climb down. One day, Rapunzel stupidly asks Mother Gothel why it's easier to pull up the prince instead of her. Since Mother Gothel clearly realizes what's going on and hates that Rapunzel kind of just called her fat, she angrily cuts off Rapunzel's hair and banishes her into the woods to fend for herself. That night, the prince calls for Rapunzel to let down her hair, and when he climbs up into her tower, he realizes that it was a trap set up by Gothel. He flings himself into the bushes below and is blinded by a batch of thorns. But since Gothel accidentally untied Rapunzel's hair in the process, she is now trapped inside of the tower forever. For many years, the prince wanders through the wastelands of the country, until one day he stumbles upon a very familiar voice. He and Rapunzel are once again reunited, and as they embrace each other in their arms, tears of joy fall into the prince's eyes, magically restoring his sight. The prince takes Rapunzel and now his 2 children, a boy and a girl, who she gave birth to while out in the desert, back to his castle where they live happily ever after. Barbie. In 2002, Mattel released their second direct-to-DVD Barbie film titled Barbie as Rapunzel. In their version of the story, Rapunzel was born a princess to a king and queen, but kidnapped as a baby by Mother Gothel as revenge for the king not returning his feelings to her. Barbie's Rapunzel also doesn't live in a tower, but in an enchanted manor which is magically cut off from the rest of the kingdom. Eventually, though, she discovers a way out through a secret tunnel of passages which lead her into meeting the prince. Another thing about this version of the Fairytale is that in the movie, Rapunzel's long hair doesn't really serve any purpose in the story. Mother Gothel does transform Rapunzel's bedroom into a tower after she believes Rapunzel is lying to her, but Rapunzel never uses her hair to get in and out of it. Also, Barbie's Rapunzel has a magic paintbrush which allows her to teleport through paintings, but also gives her the ability to paint dresses on herself, which is honestly like the coolest thing ever. Bevanfield Films. In 1992, Bevanfield Films, a British animation studio who did work for the BBC, created a 30-minute episode centering around Rapunzel. In this version of the story, when the witch finds the peasant husband stealing her crops, she threatens to turn the couple into animals, so that's why the husband agrees to hand over the baby. Also, after Mother Gothel banishes Rapunzel and throws the prince out of the tower, the prince manages to locate Rapunzel on an island after following a trail of golden hairs. Now, the last thing I want to point out is that this TV special ends a bit strangely, where it mentions that Rapunzel's parents have received an invitation for her and the prince's wedding, even though I'm not exactly sure how Rapunzel was able to figure out who her parents were, or vice versa. Britannica's Tales from Around the World. The Fairytale of Rapunzel was chosen in 1990 to represent the country of Germany in this direct-to-VHS educational series. The 9-minute episode opens with a farmer's wife wanting her husband to grab some Rapunzel from Mother Gothel Gothel's garden to celebrate the birth of her daughter. The farmer agrees, and while doing so, is caught by the witch. The farmer's wife then comes over with her baby in hand to scold her husband for taking so long. When Mother Gothel lays eyes on their daughter, she falls in love with her and agrees to let the couple take her plants, but in exchange for the baby. Now, since the new parents are so scared of the witch's powers, they agree to do so, and the rest of the episode is almost exactly the same as the original fairy tale, except in this version of the story, Mother Gothel finds out about the prince after she catches him sneaking out of the tower early one morning. Eventually, though, Rapunzel and her prince are reunited, and the episode ends with them getting married. Disney. In 2010, the Walt Disney Animation Studios released their own version of Rapunzel called Tangled. In this movie, Rapunzel is kidnapped as a baby by Mother Gothel from the King and Queen of Corona because of her magical hair, which can not only heal wounds but also reverse aging. And just like the fairy tale, a man arrives at her tower, but instead of a prince, it's a handsome thief named Flynn Rider. Now, since this is a Disney movie, this film has a lot more depth to it than the original story. The last thing I do want to point out is that similar to the fairy tale, Rapunzel's tears heal her man, but instead of curing his blindness, it brings him back to life after he was stabbed by Mother Gothel. Ever After High. While Rapunzel doesn't make an appearance in this show, her role is played by her twin daughters, Poppy and Holly O'Hare. Holly is destined to be the next Rapunzel because she's older, while her sister Poppy is unaware of her true destiny. However, early on in this series, we find out that the twins' birth certificates were accidentally switched, but since they like their destinies, they decided to keep this a secret. And while Holly enjoys brushing her long hair and reading, Poppy likes to spend her time working at the local hair salon. So in the last version of this video, I mentioned that I didn't like how the designers at Mattel gave them red hair instead of blonde. However, here I'll give them a pass because I learned that in the original fairy tale, it technically never stated Rapunzel had blonde hair. Now, I would make more of an argument as to why I think they should be blonde, but there's so many Rapunzels on this list that aren't blonde, and I don't really care enough to argue that at this point. Fairytale Police Department. In this episode of Fairytale Police Department, the prince comes down to the station to report Rapunzel missing. The detectives head to the tower and find that Rapunzel is gone, but is left behind a long strand of her hair. They take a hair sample back to the lab and discover that it contains a magic growth serum. Eventually, the search leads them to a wig shop where they find Rapunzel, who explains that for years she used Ralph's shampoo, but one day it caused all of her hair to fall out, so she created a magical growth serum to grow it back. Rapunzel let her hair down, believing at the bottom of the tower was a handsome prince, but it turned out to be Ralph himself. He tries to capture Rapunzel, but she gets away by cutting off part of her hair and using it to climb out. Eventually, though, Ralph finds out and kidnaps Rapunzel before taking her down to his factory. But in the end, she's rescued by Christine and Johnny, and Ralph is thrown into jail. Fractured Fairy Tales. Fractured Fairy Tales is a series of short segments that ran alongside the television show The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. In the short, the prince runs into Mother Gothel at the bottom of the tower after sliding down Rapunzel's hair. The witch then punishes the couple by blinding the prince and cutting Rapunzel's hair completely off before flying away on her broomstick. However, after 2 years, Rapunzel and the prince are reunited after her hair grows back to its original long length. The prince then tells Rapunzel that the only way to escape the tower is by jumping out of it, and Rapunzel does so, safely landing on a pile of her hair down below. The special then ends on an ironic note, with Rapunzel craving the same vegetables from Mother Gothel's garden, as the witch flies into the shot, exclaiming, "Here we go again." Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. In 1989, Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics released their own version of Rapunzel for TV. In this episode, after Mother Gothel takes Rapunzel for herself, she casts a spell on the peasant couple so that as they continue on having more children, they will eventually forget about their firstborn daughter. Also similar to Britannica's version, Mother Gothel finds out about the prince after she catches him leaving Rapunzel's tower early one morning. However, the episode ends similar to the fairy tale, with Rapunzel and her prince reuniting and the prince meeting his child. Honestly, this episode was kind of boring and didn't really add anything of interest. There's this one scene where Mother Gothel tells Rapunzel that she rescued her from a witch that placed an evil spell on her parents, but Rapunzel eventually starts not believing her. And to be fair, if my grandma looked this creepy, I wouldn't believe her either. Happily Ever After. Fairy tales for every child. So in their version of Rapunzel, the story is set in New Orleans, where a couple lives next to a voodoo witch named Zenobia. Now this episode is once again very similar to the original fairy tale, but Zenobia actually raises Rapunzel right next door to her parents. However, after she spots Rapunzel chatting to a handsome stranger, she locks her away high up in a tower. The prince is able to locate Rapunzel's whereabouts, but after Zenobia catches him slipping out of the tower, she cuts off Rapunzel's hair and throws her into the river. Fortunately, Unfortunately though, she survives, and even though the prince was blinded, he is able to find Rapunzel by listening to her sing. Eventually the two are reunited, and Rapunzel is finally able to meet and interact with her parents. Happily never after. I do feel a bit ridiculous including her on the list, but technically Rapunzel does appear in this movie. When Frida is playing around with the scales of good and evil, she messes with Rapunzel's story, causing her to fall out of the tower and land on a pile of her own hair. Once Upon a Zombie. In the 3 episodes of Once Upon a Zombie that were released, Rapunzel along with Snow White and Cinderella are discussing on Skype what to wear to the Wonderland Ball. When they hang up, Rapunzel attempts to comb her hair, but her brush magically transforms her into a zombie. The 3 princesses discuss the strange phenomenon and decide to head to the ball anyways, but that's where the show unfortunately kinda ends. Regal Academy. Similar to Ever After High, Rapunzel is in the show, but her role is played by her granddaughter, Astoria Rapunzel. Now, Astoria is the bookworm and goody two-shoes of the group. She's often worried about failing all the time and stresses about getting the best grades. Her grandmother is Rapunzel, the magister of the school. Now, one thing that's very unique about Astoria is her ivy hair. It's a bit complicated to explain without watching the entire show, but the hair has somewhat of a mind of its own, and Astoria can use it in a variety of different ways, such as to grab or hold objects. Shrek. Rapunzel first appears in Shrek the Third alongside the rest of the princesses who are throwing Fiona a baby shower. Unfortunately though, their shower is interrupted when Prince Charming and his minions stage a coup on Fiona's castle. The girls manage to escape, but Rapunzel sneaks away, causing the rest of the gang to follow her. Bursting through the doors, the princesses are surrounded by the guards, and we find out that Rapunzel and Prince Charming did not only plan this to happen, but are also secretly dating. Rapunzel is later seen at Prince Charming's stage show, where it's revealed that her hair is a wig and she is secretly bald. She runs off in a panic and her tower falls on top of Charming, crushing him. Simsala Grimm. In Simsala Grimm's version of this fairy tale, Mother Gothel tries to teach Rapunzel the art of sorcery, but she initially refuses. A while later, Rapunzel meets the prince, who along with Doc Rock and Yo-Yo come up with the idea of having her escape the tower by creating a ladder with 287 feet of silk. Mother Gothel sees through her crystal ball the prince climbing into the tower and becomes so angry that she not only cuts Rapunzel's hair off and kicks her out, but also throws the prince into the bushes below, blinding him. Eventually, Rapunzel wanders into a cave where she finds her parents transformed into stone statues. Doc Rock, Yo-Yo, and the prince stumble upon the cave, and the prince and Rapunzel are turned to stone by Mother Gothel. However, Doc Rock uses a spell from Mother Gothel's magic book that changes her into stone, and the episode ends with Rapunzel, the prince, and Rapunzel's parents all turning back into their human selves. Timeless Tales. In 1990, Olivia Newton-John was a host of a TV show called Timeless Tales, which narrated and animated 8 different fairy tales. In their version of Rapunzel, the witch is for some reason named Scarlotta, and she is able to take Rapunzel from her parents by freezing them in their place. Now again, the story plays out very similarly to the fairy tale, but the witch finds out about the prince after Rapunzel really just straight up tells her that she's met a prince and they will get married. Obviously this upsets Scarlotta, and she cuts off Rapunzel's hair and then sends her into the woods. Now when the prince comes to see Rapunzel, Scarlotta turns him into a bird, and he flies into the forest, where he's eventually reunited with his love, and her tear transforms him back into a prince. Yeah, the bird thing I thought was honestly kind of weird, but after watching like 15 of these in one day, it was refreshing to see a somewhat different ending. Video Brinquedo. So Video Brinquedo, who is the company behind Little Princess School, actually created a full-length Rapunzel movie in 2005. Now very interestingly, the storyline is a bit familiar to the entire conflict of Ever After High, with Rapunzel, aka Rap, being locked away in a reformatory school for fairy tale characters who don't agree to accept their happily ever afters. Rap is there because she refuses to maintain her hair as she wants to marry a prince who loves her for more than her appearance. Eventually though, while one day practicing her singing, a prince stumbles across her tower. Over time, they begin to fall in love and write music with each other, and Rap finally tends to her hair so that the prince is able to climb up the tower and see her. Unfortunately though, they are caught by the witch, aka Miss B, who places a blindness curse on the prince and kicks Rapunzel out of the school. In the end though, the two of them are reunited and they form a band together, with the reformatory school getting permanently closed. Okay, so last on our list is Wolves, Witches, and Giants. So this is finally the stock character of the witch's main story, and in this version of Rapunzel, she's actually a grown woman who steals some crops from the witch's garden because her dad is so poor that they can't afford food. The witch catches her though and teleports Rapunzel into a tower. Now, the episode follows the typical fairy storyline, but in this version of events, the prince accidentally proposes to the witch, and after being so shocked by her ugliness, he vows to never open his eyes again until he hears Rapunzel's voice. Eventually, though, after many years of traveling, he hears Rapunzel singing in a cave, and the two are reunited. So now it's time for the rankings. Number 17 is Happily Never After. Cute design, but since she probably has the shortest appearance out of any Rapunzel on this list, I had to put her in last place. Number 16 is Fractured Fairytales. The proportions of the size of her head to the rest of her body disturbs me greatly. I also am not crazy about the way her hair looks in this cartoon. Number 15 is Wolves, Witches, and Giants. I actually enjoyed this episode much more than I typically do when I watch this show, but again, her animation is still kinda ugly and Rapunzel doesn't talk. Number 14 is Bevanfield Films. The only thing that saves this Rapunzel is her design, because not only does she not talk in this special, but the animation overall is actually very dreadful looking. Number 13 is Video Brinquedo. As much as the animation in this movie is absolutely horrendous, I do like the rebellious personality they gave their Rapunzel. Now, I don't personally think that not washing her hair is a super interesting and great form of rebellion, but I do believe that this storyline had the potential to be a lot more interesting. Except, you know, this studio is cheap and the writing always sucks. Number 12 is Once Upon a Zombie. The British accent they gave her is really atrocious, and we don't really know that much about this Rapunzel. Also, the scene of her riding a horse has got to be the worst cartoon animation I've ever seen. Number 11 is Grimm's Fairytale Classics. Nothing about this Rapunzel was particularly memorable to me, other than the fact that instead of singing to the prince, she plays a harp, which I think is pretty lame. She does have the same voice actress as Draculaura, so I guess that's kind of cool. Number 10 is Happily Ever After, Fairy Tales for Every Child. I thought the retelling of this Rapunzel was interesting, but honestly I wish they would have done a bit more with her character design, especially her dress. To me, it felt like the designers gave Zenobia all the attention and just left Rapunzel on the sidelines. Number 9 is Fairytale Police Department. Most fairytale characters in this show have this bad case of annoying British accent, and while this Rapunzel's voice is a bit irritating, she's nowhere near as bad as the rest of the princesses typically are. I also really like how she runs a business with her magical hair growth serum at the end of this episode. It's a pretty fun and unique idea. Number 8 is Simsala Grimm. I think the idea of Rapunzel being a sorceress is a pretty unique one, so I don't know why she was being so lame about it. Regardless though, I thought her character design was beautiful, but I just feel like overall there's a lot more interesting Rapunzels on this list. Number 7 is Britannica's Tales from Around the World. It's a shame that this special is so short because I am in love with the way their Rapunzel looks. She reminds me of like a Tootie Bratz doll and her dress is so cute. Now, I feel it's a bit unfair that I'm ranking her so high, but to be completely honest, when does beauty not sort of win in my rankings? Number 6 is Timeless Tales. I tend to go back and forth on whether or not I think Hanna-Barbera's animation style looks super good or super cheap. However, I can't argue that their design for Rapunzel isn't very beautiful. Usually I'm not really into the whole formal nightgown look or whatever you call this type of dress, but here I think it works really well with her hair. Honestly though, the real star of this movie is the prince because he's hot as HE double hockey stick. Number 5 is Ever After High. So usually I would never rank an Ever After High character so low on a list, but here's my problem. First of all, Holly's voice actress is awful. She makes the beautiful and stunning Holly sound like an annoying 35-year-old woman, and what really bothers me is that Poppy and Holly both give me this cringy side character energy. However, I can't argue that they both don't have some of the best character development on this list, and their designs overall are really fantastic. Number 4 is Shrek. I love the villain angle they gave Rapunzel in this movie. I would even go as far as to argue that I don't really believe she's that bad of a person, but that's a topic for another video. I love her design, especially how they made her hair kind of look like this ice cream cone shape with the braids wrapping around it. Number 3 is Regal Academy. Astoria might be a goody two-shoes and worries to the point of insanity, but I find her to be one of the few characters in this show who isn't either clueless, dumb, or annoying. I love that her hair is its own living organism, even though the fact that it becomes green on the bottom kind of weirdly grosses me out. I do wish, though, Astoria was a tad bit better designed because I really love her pink hair, but her outfits are always kind of boring. Number 2 is Barbie. I don't really know what to say here because how could you truly hate any character Barbie plays? I mean, Barbie's Rapunzel not only has one of the prettiest dresses out of any Rapunzel on this list, but I love how passionate she is about painting. One thing I'll be honest about, though, is I prefer her 1995 look. Don't hate me. Number 1 is Disney. I just remember watching this movie for the first time and realizing that Rapunzel was suddenly one of my favorite Disney princesses ever. I love everything about Disney's Rapunzel. I love how curious she is. I love how artistic she is. I love how she wants to know so much more about the world. I really like that Disney made her hair super long and have its own amazing abilities. It was definitely a twist to the Rapunzel story I don't think anyone saw coming, and it worked so well. I guess we'll never really know why this movie didn't hit the same numbers as Frozen at the box office. If you liked this video today and want to see more content in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you soon. Bye!